When you think of high-quality, ambitious television, one network comes to mind. But when it comes to foreign language news broadcasts and repeats of letters and numbers, well, you can't go past SBS. G'day, I'm Ray Martin, and Channel 9 won't return my phone calls. Up until 1980, the ABC was Australia's least watched TV channel. SBS changed all that. But how did this underfunded niche broadcaster rise to become the underfunded niche broadcaster that it is today? For the first time on Australian TV, we bothered to find out. All through the 1950s and 60s, Australian television had been a wasteland. With not one renovation or cooking show, the industry needed a shot in the arm. That came in 1975.
1975 saw the introduction of colour television in Australia, and it was the first time Australians finally got to see white people in colour. But some started to wonder, what if we could see people of colour in colour?
The idea of a multicultural television network didn't gain traction, though, until 1976, when Prime Minister Malcolm Fraser was channel surfing in the Lodge one night and he noticed a gap in the market.
My grandfather was in the Lodge that night, attending to Mr. Fraser's request for a spot of tea. Mr. Fraser gave him a napkin and said, "Put this with my files." And it was really on that napkin that SBS was born.
But SBS wasn't just a channel for boobs, it was also a channel for bush.
I mean, people think that HBO is the home of tits and bush, but it was really SBS that broke down those barriers.
SBS began full-time transmission on October 24, 1980. But unfortunately, SBS's ambition to showcase multicultural voices got off to a nightmare start.
Ladies and gentlemen, good evening and welcome to Multicultural Television.
بفتكر ما في شيء بيقول multiculturalism أكثر من رجال أبيض اسمه بروس.
Yeah, it was a rough start, but ultimately worth it, because without SBS, the only brown person on Australian television would be Chris Lilley. And the only Asian person on Australian television would be Chris Lilley.
Although primarily designed for new Australians, SBS would go on to make invaluable contributions to Australia more broadly.
The movie show was groundbreaking because it provided an opportunity for Australians to see the only two people who have watched Australian films.
I think SBS's greatest cultural contribution is improving the foreign language literacy of Australians. For example, thanks to SBS's late night programming, most Australians now know the French word for pubic mound.
SBS has produced many superstars over the years: Lee Lin Chen, Les Murray, Margaret and David. But no one at SBS is as recognisable as the yellow subtitles.
To this day, when I see that shade of yellow, I involuntarily get a stiffy. So for that I say, thank you SBS.
7 billion stories and counting, and so far 6 billion of those stories have featured genitals. No complaints here. But after all these years, what SBS actually stands for remains a mystery.
Ray, it's Special Broadcasting Service.
Oh, good night.